However, where they encountered a society with no previously developed hierarchy like that, and he's talking now the Spanish in the Caribbean, and particularly this one, the English in North America, right, which is one that goes focus on. The conquerors employed a policy tending to the complete elimination of the indigenous population, which is what happens in the Caribbean, by slaughter and or expulsion, forcing them out, which is what happens in Virginia, right? They keep moving the Indians out. But then, as they remove the native population, in this second situation, the colonized have to seek foreign supplies of labor to produce that profit, right? If they're not going to be able to force it on the people there, then they've got to get a labor supply, and it's got to be a labor supply that they can control. And this is getting very deeply into how the U.S., what we know as the U.S., differs from elsewhere. Go on. Here's his quote. I like this one about the slaughter and expulsion. Bourgeoisie could care less, right? Looks upon progress indifferently. Sean, next. Okay, he lays out a little schema for, in general, the social structure of class societies. He's using the phrase buffer social control stratum. It's basically the people in the middle who live in relative economic security, subordinate to the ruling class, day-to-day contact with the regular folks, people at the bottom with no productive wealth. Go on. In differences in a key distinction between national oppression and racial oppression. And he makes this distinction throughout both volumes. This is very important, I think, for people, because we use these phrases, a lot of us now. He says one of the key distinctions is the source from which the social control stratum is recruited, whether it's from the oppressed or the oppressor group. Sean, under a system of racial oppression, social control depends upon denial of the legitimacy of social distinctions. That's what we knew in 18th century Virginia, right? Under national oppression, social control depends upon the acceptance and fostering of social distinctions. You're a national bourgeoisie, if you will, right? Come on. Under racial oppression in Virginia, any person of discernible non-European ancestry after Bacon's Rebellion, after they start setting up this system, were denied a role in the social control buffer. Whereas in contrast, in the Caribbean, mulattoes were included in the social control group and were promoted to middle class status. And that's, we see in St. Croix, Jamaica, Barbados. We're talking Anglo-Caribbean now. Come on. John, sorry. So he says that this difference was the key to understanding the difference in the policy between Virginia's ruling class policy, because Virginia not only doesn't include any African Americans in the policy, but they fix a perpetual brand on every African American. He explains why and how this again differs from what is done elsewhere, right? One statistic, and people can think about this, in Jamaica, on the eve of emancipation, 23% of the enslaved African labor force were owned by people of color. It's a qualitative difference, right? Come on. The difference was rooted in the objective fact that in the West Indies, there were too few laboring class Europeans to embody an adequate petty bourgeoisie. And this gets to do with that demographics again. Remember St. Croix, you only got 5% European. There's no poor whites, so you can't base your social control system on them. Whereas in Virginia, for example, there were so many, and we're going to get into why and how Virginia develops and how Anglo-America, the plantation colonies, develop. So the difference is rooted, West Indies, there were too few laboring class Europeans, while in the continental colonies, there were too many to be promoted to the petty bourgeoisie. Next.